Commander Zethkalar's claws tapped against the metal surface of his war table as he stared at the floating image of a small blue planet. The hologram showed Earth as it was 30 years ago, before everything changed. His four eyes focused on the swirling white clouds and green continents that had once seemed so insignificant. Now that tiny world haunted his dreams. The old commander's breathing was slow and heavy as he activated the recording device. His scaled skin had dulled with age, and the battle scars across his chest told stories of 47 conquered worlds. Earth should have been number 48. It should have been easy. Archive entry 7012. He spoke into the device. Personal testimony of Fleet Commander Zethkalar regarding the Sol System incident. His voice carried the weight of 3 decades of regret. I am recording this for future generations who will study what happened when we encountered the species called humans. The memory began as all his memories did now, with the sound of alarms in his flagship's bridge. It was a routine patrol near the outer rim of the galaxy when his long-range sensors detected something unusual. Energy signatures unlike anything. In their databases were coming from a small solar system with 9 planets. The third planet from its star showed signs of advanced civilization. Zethkalar remembered how excited his science officer had been. Sir, the energy readings suggest they have discovered quantum mechanics and basic space travel, the young officer had reported. They appeared to be in the early stages of system colonization. At the time, Zethkalar had barely looked up from his tactical reports. Another primitive species to add to the hegemony's collection. The pattern was always the same. Send scouts, evaluate their military capability, demand surrender, and when they refused, demonstrate superior firepower until they submitted. 47 times this method had worked perfectly. Dispatch a survey team to their outer settlements, he had ordered. Find their weakest positions and assess their technology level. 3 days later, his scouts returned with footage from a research station orbiting the 4th planet in the system. The planet was red and lifeless, but the humans had built a small outpost there anyway. The images showed 2 humans working inside the station when his troops arrived. The first human was a male with short brown hair and calm eyes. He wore a blue uniform with the name Morrison written on it. When Zethkalar's soldiers surrounded him, the human had not panicked or begged for mercy. Instead, he had looked directly at the camera and asked, "Who are you, and what do you want?" The female human was smaller with long black hair tied back. Her uniform said Grant, and she carried some kind of scientific equipment. While the soldiers searched their station, she had continued working on her device as if armed aliens breaking into her home was a normal occurrence. Interesting reaction, Zethkalar had noted at the time. Most species either fled in terror or immediately offered submission when first contacted by the hegemony. These humans seemed more curious than afraid. The human male, Morrison, had been the first to speak when the universal translator finished calibrating. "Are you here to establish diplomatic relations?" he asked. His voice was steady and professional. "If so, you'll need to contact our government on Earth." Zethkalar's soldiers had laughed at this. The idea that a primitive species would try to negotiate with the hegemony was amusing. But something about the human's tone had bothered the commander. Morrison spoke as if he was dealing with equals, not superior beings who held his life in their hands. The female, Grant, had looked up from her device long enough to study the alien soldiers. "Your technology appears to be based on crystalline energy matrices," she observed. "That's fascinating. We've been working on similar principles but haven't achieved stable containment yet." Even through the translator, her scientific excitement was clear. Here was a being whose world was being invaded, yet she was more interested in learning about alien technology than worrying about her safety. Zethkalar had never encountered such behavior. His soldiers had demanded to know about human military capabilities and defensive positions. Morrison had simply replied, "That information would need to come from our military command. I'm just a research station captain." When they pressed harder, threatening violence, Grant had finally looked up from her work. "You could probably find most of what you want to know from our public information networks," she said helpfully. Humans aren't particularly secretive about general technology and military structure. This openness had confused Zethkalar's troops. Every other species they encountered tried to hide their weaknesses or lied about their capabilities. These humans were offering to help their potential conquerors gather intelligence about them. The survey team had returned to the flagship with detailed reports about human settlements throughout the solar system. Small mining operations on asteroids, research stations on various moons, and a growing population on the third planet called Earth. Their technology was primitive by hegemony standards, but they were expanding rapidly across their solar system. Zethkalar had studied the tactical data with satisfaction. Fewer than 12 billion humans spread across multiple small settlements. No unified space fleet. Limited defensive capabilities. It would be the easiest conquest in hegemony history. Prepare the standard surrender demand, he had ordered his communications officer. Broadcast it to all human settlements simultaneously. The message was simple and had worked on 47 previous occasions. Submit to hegemony rule, accept integration into their empire, and no harm would come to their species. Refuse, and their worlds would burn. The response had come from someone called Admiral Sullivan, broadcasting from the third planet. Zethkalar still remembered her exact words because they were so different from every other species. First reaction to contact with the hegemony. This is Admiral Kate Sullivan of the United Earth Defense Force, the transmission began. We acknowledge your message and reject your terms completely. Her voice was clear and firm. Humanity does not surrender. We do not submit. We do not kneel. The transmission had continued with words that still echoed in Zethkalar's mind 3 decades later. If you want our worlds, you'll have to come and take them. And I promise you this, it's going to cost you more than you think. That had been the moment everything changed, though Zethkalar didn't realize it at the time. No species had ever responded to hegemony demands with such direct defiance. Most begged for mercy or tried to negotiate. Some threatened hopeless resistance. But none had ever spoken with such confident certainty that their resistance would succeed. Zethkalar ended the recording for the day and stared again at the hologram of Earth. He had thought Admiral Sullivan was simply another stubborn leader who would learn the futility of resistance soon enough. He had been wrong about many things in those early days, but mostly he had been wrong about what humans were capable of when everything they loved was threatened. Zethkalar's memory shifted to the day his fleet approached the outer human settlements near the giant gas planet called Jupiter. 200 hegemony warships moved through space like a dark cloud, their weapons charged and ready. The commander had expected to find terrified humans begging for mercy. Instead, he found something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The mining stations orbiting Jupiter's moons should have been easy targets. These were civilian operations with minimal defenses and small crews. According to intelligence reports, the largest station had fewer than 50 humans aboard. Zethkalar had assigned only 3 cruisers to handle all the settlements in the area. It should have been over in an hour. Commander Alex Turner was in charge of the main mining station around Europa. When Zethkalar's ships arrived, Turner's first transmission surprised everyone on the hegemony bridge. Unknown vessels, this is Europa Mining Station 7. You are entering restricted space. Please state your intentions. The human spoke as if he commanded a battle fleet instead of a mining platform. Zethkalar's tactical officer had laughed at the transmission. Sir, should we bother responding to this mining crew? Let them know what they face, Zethkalar had replied. Perhaps. Seeing our fleet will convince them to surrender without resistance. The hegemony response was standard intimidation protocol. 3 massive cruisers decloaked directly above the mining station, their weapon arrays glowing with deadly energy. Each cruiser was 10 times larger than the human station and carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon, Turner's second. Transmission was even more surprising than his first. Well, that's definitely not a commercial shipping fleet, he said calmly. All stations, this is Turner. We've got hostile contact. Implement Emergency Protocol 7 immediately. What happened next defied everything Zethkalar knew about primitive species behavior. Instead of surrendering or fleeing, the humans began modifying their mining equipment. Somehow, Turner's crew turned their asteroid processing lasers into weapons. They rerouted power from life support systems to boost their mining charges into improvised explosives. The first hegemony landing shuttle approached the station, expecting no resistance. Instead, it flew directly into a field of mining charges that Turner had somehow rigged to detonate in sequence. The explosion crippled the shuttle and sent it spinning into space. How did they do that? Zethkalar's weapons officer asked in confusion. Mining charges don't have that kind of power. They modified them, the science officer reported after scanning the debris. Somehow they increased the explosive yield by routing power from their station's main reactor. This was the first sign that humans were different from every other species the hegemony had encountered. Most civilizations used their technology exactly as designed. Humans seemed to view every piece of equipment as raw material that could be changed and improved. The battle for Europa Station lasted 6 hours. Turner's small crew held off 3 cruisers using nothing but modified mining equipment and what they called creative engineering. They had turned their ore refinement systems into projectile launchers. Their atmospheric processors became chemical weapon dispensers. Even their food preparation units were somehow converted into electronic warfare devices. But what impressed Zethkalar most was how quickly the humans learned. Every attack his ships made taught them something new about hegemony technology. When his forces used energy shields, the humans analyzed the frequency and found ways to penetrate them. When his weapons fired at them, they studied the energy patterns and developed countermeasures. Dr. Ryan Cooper was the human responsible for this rapid adaptation. He was a materials scientist who worked on the mining station, but during the battle he became something else entirely. Cooper somehow analyzed debris from damaged hegemony equipment and reverse-engineered their shield technology in less than 6 hours. This is impossible, Zethkalar's chief scientist had reported. Our shield technology took us decades to develop. How can they understand it so quickly? The answer became clear as the battle continued. Humans didn't just study alien technology, like other species did. They took it apart, rebuilt it, and made it better. Cooper wasn't just copying hegemony shields, he was improving them, Lieutenant. Maria Santos led the human boarding parties when Turner decided to take the fight directly to the hegemony ships. This was another behavior that shocked Zethkalar's forces. No species had ever tried to board hegemony vessels during their first encounter. Most were too afraid to even approach alien ships. Santos and her team used the mining stations or transport pods as assault vehicles. They modified the pods with Cooper's reverse-engineered shield technology and Turner's improvised weapons. Then they launched themselves directly at the hegemony cruisers. The boarding action was unlike anything in hegemony military history. Santos and her people fought through the cruiser corridors using tactics that no civilized species would ever consider. They used the ship's own systems against the crew, turning life support into poison gas and artificial gravity into a weapon. But the most disturbing thing about the human boarding parties was their behavior toward captured hegemony soldiers. Instead of killing them or taking them prisoner, the humans asked them questions. They wanted to know how hegemony technology worked, what their military doctrine was, and why they invaded other species. "They're trying to understand us," one captured officer reported when he was eventually rescued. "Not just our technology, they want to know how we think." The siege of Europa Station ended when Colonel Danny Foster arrived with reinforcements from the other mining settlements. Foster commanded a small fleet of mining ships and cargo haulers that had been hastily converted into warships using the modifications Cooper had developed. Foster's fleet was a joke by hegemony standards. Civilian ships with improvised weapons facing 3 military cruisers. But the humans had spent 6 hours learning how to fight hegemony forces, and they had learned well. The final battle was chaos. Foster's ships attacked from all directions using unpredictable tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. They rammed hegemony vessels with cargo ships. They used their knowledge of asteroid mining to turn rocks into guided missiles. They even somehow convinced one hegemony cruiser's computer systems to malfunction by flooding them with mining survey data. When it was over, 2 hegemony cruisers were crippled and the third was in retreat. Turner's mining station was destroyed, but most of his crew had survived. Foster's makeshift fleet had lost half their ships, but they had won their first battle against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. As Zethkalar reviewed the battle reports, he felt something he had never experienced in 46 previous conquests. For the first time in his military career, he was not certain of victory. The humans had lost the battle, but they had learned from it. And somehow Zethkalar knew that the next battle would be much harder. Zethkalar's memory turned to the darkest period of the war, when his forces had finally reached Earth itself. The planet's orbital defenses had fallen after 3 weeks of bombardment. The human space fleet was scattered and broken. Every military satellite had been destroyed. By all logic, the war should have been over. The humans should have surrendered. Instead, they did something no species in galactic history had ever done. They refused to stay conquered. The first landing forces touched down in major human cities, expecting to find a defeated population ready to submit to hegemony rule. What they found instead was every street turned into a battlefield and every human civilian transformed into a potential threat. Sergeant Tom Bradley had been a simple police officer in the city called Chicago before the invasion. When Zethkalar's troops occupied his city, Bradley did not flee or hide. He organized the remaining civilians into resistance cells that turned the urban landscape into a maze of deadly traps. Bradley's people knew their city better than any alien invader could. They used the underground transport tunnels to move unseen beneath hegemony patrols. They turned office buildings into sniper nests and shopping centers into ambush points. Every intersection became a potential battle zone. The humans are not fighting like a defeated army, Zethkalar's ground commander had reported after the first week of occupation. They fight like every building is their home and every street is worth dying for. The resistance spread faster than hegemony forces could contain it. In New York, engineer Amy Clark had taken control of the subway system and turned it into an underground weapons factory. Using salvaged alien technology and human manufacturing techniques, Clark's teams produced improvised weapons that could damage hegemony equipment. Clark's operation was hidden in the maze of tunnels beneath the city. Every day, her people would emerge from hidden entrances to attack hegemony supply convoys, then disappear back underground before reinforcements could arrive. The aliens controlled the surface of the city, but the humans owned everything below ground. Dr. Nick Roberts had been a space agency scientist before the war. When Earth fell, Roberts created a communication network that connected human resistance groups across the entire planet. Using a combination of pre-war internet infrastructure and captured alien communication devices, Roberts made it possible for resistance fighters to share information and coordinate attacks instantly. They learn from every engagement, Zethkalar's intelligence officer reported with growing concern. When we develop a new tactic in one city, every human resistance group knows about it within hours. When one group discovers a weakness in our equipment, they all know about it immediately. This rapid information sharing made the humans more dangerous with each passing day. A technique that worked against Bradley's forces in Chicago would be useless against Clark's people in New York because they had already developed countermeasures. The aliens found themselves fighting not just individual resistance groups, but a planet-wide learning organism that adapted faster than they could respond. The breaking point came when Captain Steve Miller somehow infiltrated the main hegemony orbital command station. Miller had been a test pilot before the war, known for flying experimental aircraft that other humans considered too dangerous. When Earth's defenses fell, Miller had stolen a damaged alien fighter and spent weeks learning to fly it. The infiltration should have been impossible. The orbital station was protected by shields, automated defenses, and a full battalion of hegemony soldiers. But Miller had spent months studying alien technology and tactics. He knew exactly how their security systems worked and where their weaknesses were. Miller's captured fighter approached the station using false identification codes that Dr. Roberts had helped him obtain from intercepted communications. The fighter appeared to be returning from a patrol mission, and station security allowed it to dock without suspicion. Once aboard the station, Miller moved through the corridors with the confidence of someone who belonged there. He had studied recordings of alien behavior patterns and learned to mimic their movement and gestures. To casual observers, he looked like just another hegemony soldier going about his duties. Miller's target was the station's main reactor. He had learned from captured technical manuals that overloading the reactor would cripple the station's ability to coordinate ground operations across Earth. But instead of simply sabotaging the reactor, Miller did something that shocked everyone who later studied the incident. He improved the reactor's design while he sabotaged it, using techniques that Roberts had developed for modifying alien technology. Miller enhanced the reactor's power output just before triggering the overload. This made the explosion far more destructive than anyone had expected. Instead of just disabling the station, Miller's sabotage completely destroyed it and damaged every hegemony ship in the surrounding area. Miller's final transmission before the explosion became legendary among human resistance fighters across the galaxy. "This is Captain Steve Miller to all human forces," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Tell the galaxy that humans don't surrender. We adapt, we learn, we overcome, and we never stop fighting for what's right." The destruction of the orbital command station changed everything. Suddenly, hegemony ground forces on Earth found themselves without coordination from above. Their supply lines were disrupted. Their communication networks were compromised. Their tactical advantage disappeared overnight. Meanwhile, human resistance groups used the chaos to launch coordinated attacks across the planet. Mechanic Jill Anderson had figured out how to modify captured hegemony weapons to fire at twice their designed rate. Her modifications spread through the resistance network within days, giving human fighters a significant advantage in urban combat. Pilot Luke Morgan had learned to fly alien aircraft better than their original operators. Using techniques from human aviation combined with alien technology, Morgan could outmaneuver hegemony pilots who had been trained for decades. His success inspired other human pilots to develop new flying tactics that no alien military academy had ever considered. The occupation of Earth became a nightmare for Zethkalar's forces. They controlled the major cities during the day, but at night the humans emerged from hiding to retake territory and gather intelligence. Every week brought new human innovations and tactics. Every month made the resistance stronger and more coordinated. "We are not occupying a defeated planet," Zethkalar finally admitted to his staff after 6 months of brutal urban warfare. "We are trapped on a world where every human considers themselves a soldier and every building is a fortress." The burning had begun, but it was not Earth that was ablaze. It was the very concept of hegemony invincibility that was turning to ash. Zethkalar's claws trembled as he recalled the day that changed everything he believed about warfare and conquest. 6 months after the occupation of Earth began, the impossible happened. The humans launched a counterattack. Not just scattered resistance raids or desperate suicide missions, but a full military offensive using a fleet that should not have existed. Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of a ship that defied every rule of military engineering. Half the vessel was human construction welded directly to captured hegemony hull sections. The command center used human computer systems running alien software that had been completely rewritten by human programmers. Weapons arrays mixed human, projectile systems with modified alien energy, weapons that fired with twice their original power. Carter's fleet was a collection of impossibilities. Cargo ships that had been converted into battleships using salvaged alien armor. Mining vessels equipped with weapons that human engineers had built from scratch using alien technology they barely understood. Transport shuttles that now carried missiles designed by humans who had never seen space combat until 6 months ago. Fleet status report. Carter requested as his ships moved toward the hegemony staging area near Earth's moon. His tactical officer was a former truck driver named Pete Rodriguez who had learned alien battle computers by studying captured equipment for 12 hours a day. "All ships report ready for combat, sir," Rodriguez replied. Dr. Evans confirms that the communication network is fully operational. Dr. Chris Evans had accomplished something that hegemony scientists considered impossible. Working with captured alien technicians who had chosen to defect rather than continue serving an empire built on conquest, Evans had cracked a faster-than-light communication system that connected all hegemony forces across the galaxy. The breakthrough had come when Evans realized that alien communication technology was designed around the assumption that only authorized military personnel would ever have access to it. The security systems were incredibly sophisticated but completely unprepared for humans, who approached the technology from directions that no alien engineer had ever considered. "The network penetration is complete," Evans reported from his position. At a control station that looked like alien technology had been attacked by human creativity. Every human settlement in the solar system now has real-time communication with every other settlement. We can coordinate operations across millions of kilometers instantly. This was the moment when scattered human resistance became unified. Human counterattack. Mining colonies on asteroids could now support ground operations on Earth. Research stations on distant moons could provide tactical information to fleet units engaging enemy ships. For the first time since the invasion began, humans were fighting as one coordinated force, instead of isolated groups. But the real shock was what human engineers had done to improve alien technology. Paul Davis had been a mechanical engineer before the war, designing manufacturing equipment for civilian industries. When he got his hands on hegemony ship designs, Davis saw them not as perfect alien creations but as rough drafts that could be improved. Davis had made hegemony technology better than the hegemony had ever made it. His modifications increased engine efficiency by 30%. His weapon improvements doubled their effective range. His shield enhancements could deflect attacks that would have destroyed the original designs. This should not be possible, Zeth Kalar's chief engineer had reported when they first encountered Davis-modified human ships. "Our technology represents thousands of years of development by the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. How can a species that discovered spaceflight less than a century ago improve upon it?" The answer was something that hegemony culture could not understand. Humans did not see technology as something to be copied or used exactly as designed. They saw every piece of equipment as a starting point for innovation. Where aliens learned to operate their technology perfectly, humans learned to make their technology better. Captain Sue Taylor commanded a ship that proved this point better than any other. Taylor had somehow convinced an entire hegemony dreadnought crew to switch sides during the chaos following Steve Miller's sabotage of the orbital command station. The alien crew had not been forced or threatened, they had been convinced. "They offered us something we had never considered," the alien captain later explained to hegemony investigators. "A choice. In all our centuries of service to the hegemony, we had never been asked what we wanted to fight for. The humans asked us this question, and we realized we wanted to fight for the right to ask questions." Taylor's ship became a symbol of something new in galactic warfare. Humans and aliens working together as equals, combining human innovation with alien experience to create something neither species could achieve alone. The ship's hybrid crew developed tactics that used the best of both military traditions while inventing completely new approaches to space combat. The space battle for Luna base became the turning point of the entire war. Colonel Tina Ross led the ground assault while Commander Greg Stone coordinated the fleet engagement above. Both operations succeeded not through superior numbers or better weapons, but through tactics that no alien military academy had ever taught. Ross's ground forces used modified alien equipment to tunnel directly into the base instead of attacking the heavily defended entrances. Her soldiers had learned to think like miners and engineers instead of traditional infantry. They turned the base's own defensive systems against the hegemony garrison by rewiring control circuits, using techniques that Amy Clark had developed. In the New York subway tunnels, Stone's fleet victory was even more impressive. His ships were outnumbered 3-1 and should have been destroyed within minutes. Instead, Stone used coordination tactics that relied on instant communication between ships separated by thousands of kilometers. His captains could respond to changing battle conditions faster than light-speed signals could travel between enemy vessels. The key was human adaptability combined with alien technology. Stone's ships could change their tactics in the middle of combat based on real-time analysis of enemy behavior. When hegemony forces tried to use their standard battle formations, human ships would reconfigure their attack patterns to exploit weaknesses that their computers had identified seconds earlier. They fight like a single organism with dozens of bodies, Zethkalar's fleet commander reported after his defeat at Luna Base. We cannot predict their movements because they change their entire strategy every few minutes based on what they learn from our responses. The victory at Luna Base was complete and total. Hegemony forces were not just defeated, they were converted. More than half the surviving alien soldiers requested permission to join human forces rather than return to the hegemony fleet. They had seen what humans were building and wanted to be part of something better than conquest. As Zethkalar watched the tactical recordings of the battle, he finally understood what his forces were really fighting. This was not a war between two military forces. This was evolution in action, and the humans represented something that the galaxy had never seen before, a species that made everything around them better instead of simply consuming it. Zethkalar's memory moved to the period that still made him question everything he had believed about the natural order of the galaxy. The humans had not stopped with liberating their own solar system. Within 1 year of their impossible victory at Luna Base, they were doing something that no species in galactic history had ever attempted. They were liberating everyone else. Captain Pete Nelson commanded the first human expeditionary force to leave the Sol system. His mission was to free the enslaved Vorthan homeworld, a planet that had been under hegemony control for over 2 centuries. The Vorthans were a peaceful species of farmers and artists who had been conquered so long ago that most had forgotten what freedom looked like. Nelson's fleet consisted of 12 ships that combined human innovation with technology from 6 different alien species. Every vessel in his command was crewed by a mix of humans and aliens who had chosen to fight alongside them. The ships themselves were masterpieces of hybrid engineering that incorporated the best features of multiple civilizations. Approaching Vorthan space, Nelson's navigator reported. Lieutenant Sarah Kim had been a commercial pilot before the war, but she had learned to navigate interstellar space using a combination of human astronomy and alien star charts. Hegemony patrol vessels detected on long-range sensors. The hegemony defense fleet around the Vorthan homeworld expected to face a standard alien attack. They had defended this system against liberation attempts by dozens of species over the centuries. Every previous attempt had followed predictable patterns: overwhelming force, direct assault, conventional tactics. Nelson's approach was completely different. Instead of attacking the hegemony fleet directly, his ships began broadcasting on frequencies that reached the planet's surface. The transmissions were not military communications, but something the galaxy had never heard before: messages of hope and practical instructions for revolution. Dr. Sam Bell had developed a new form of psychological warfare that the hegemony had no defense against. Bell was a former teacher who had studied alien cultures during Earth's occupation period. She understood that most conquered species had forgotten how to fight for themselves after generations of hegemony rule. People of Vorthan, Bell's voice carried across the planet through modified communication systems that bypassed hegemony censorship networks. You are not alone. Freedom is possible. Here is how you can help us help you. The broadcasts included detailed instructions for sabotage, coordination, and resistance that had been developed during Earth's liberation. But more importantly, they carried something that conquered species had not heard in centuries: proof that the hegemony could be defeated. The Vorthan uprising began within hours of the first broadcast. Farmers stopped delivering food to hegemony. Garrisons. Factory workers sabotaged manufacturing equipment using techniques that Amy Clark had pioneered in New York's underground. Artists created propaganda that spread faster than hegemony forces could contain it. But what made the Vorthan liberation different from every previous revolution was the support they received from Nelson's fleet. Instead of simply attacking hegemony, ships, the humans provided real-time tactical support to resistance groups on the planet's surface. They shared technology, weapons, and most importantly, expertise. Major Ann Brooks led the military advisory teams that landed on Vorthan to train local resistance fighters. Brooks had been a police trainer before the war, but she had learned combat tactics during Earth's occupation that no military academy taught. She understood how civilians could become effective soldiers when they were fighting for their homes. The key is not to make them fight like us, Brooks explained to her human advisors. The key is to help them fight like themselves, but with better tools and coordination. Brooks' training methods were revolutionary. Instead of imposing human military doctrine on alien fighters, she helped each species develop tactics that used their natural abilities and cultural strengths. Vorthan resistance fighters learned to use their agricultural knowledge to create biological weapons that specifically targeted hegemony equipment. Their artistic traditions became the foundation for communication networks that hegemony intelligence could not decode. The liberation of Vorthan became a template that spread across the galaxy. Admiral Joe White commanded what became known as the Free Fleet, a constantly growing coalition of ships from dozens of species, all equipped with human-improved technology, all fighting with tactics that prioritized liberation over conquest. White's fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships designed by aquatic species worked alongside vessels built by silicon-based life forms. Weapon systems that had been created by peaceful herbivores were mounted on hulls constructed by warrior races. The diversity should have created chaos, but instead it created strength. Every species brings something unique to the coalition. White reported to the growing network of liberated worlds. The Crystallians understand energy manipulation in ways we never imagined. The hive minds can coordinate complex operations better than any computer. The gas dwellers have developed stealth technology that makes our ships invisible to most sensors. The humans had done something that no conqueror in galactic history had achieved. They had united dozens of different species, not through fear or domination, but through the simple recognition that diversity made everyone stronger. Engineer Max Turner led the joint research teams that created hybrid technologies no single species could have imagined. Turner had been an automotive designer before the war, but he had learned to think in terms of galactic engineering during the liberation campaigns. His workshops became centers of innovation where human creativity combined with alien knowledge to produce miraculous results. "We are not just building better weapons," Turner explained to a gathering of scientists from 12 different species. "We are building a better way of thinking about technology. Every species sees the universe differently, and when we combine those perspectives, we can solve problems that none of us could handle alone." Pilot Carol Stevens commanded mixed crews where former enemies fought side by side against their common oppressors. Stevens had been a commercial airline pilot before becoming one of the most effective military commanders in the coalition. Her ship's crew included hegemony defectors who had chosen freedom over conquest, liberated slaves who had learned to fight for others' liberation, and humans who had learned that victory meant making enemies into friends. The psychological impact of the coalition spread faster than their military victories. Hegemony forces across the galaxy began to question why they were fighting. Soldiers who had been told they were bringing civilization to primitive species found themselves facing coordinated resistance from dozens of different civilizations. Working together, Zethkalar's own forces began deserting in increasing numbers, not to save themselves, but to join something better than the empire they had served. The stories of human honor in battle, human innovation in crisis, and human refusal to abandon allies had spread through the hegemony ranks like a virus of hope. The thousand-year empire began to crumble not from external military pressure, but from internal transformation as its own people chose freedom over security and cooperation over domination.